Hey, Matt, Red Ritter Fits here. All right, standard disclaimer. Any weapons, firearms that you see me handling, showing you, taking apart, whatever form or fashion that I am doing it, unless I am on the range about to fire the firearm, in which case, hopefully those videos are coming soon. These guns have been cleared by me. I've already cleared them before the video. I know what's unloaded. I do not have time frankly, I only have one camera. So I don't have different ways that I can point this camera that I can show you. If I had 3 different cameras and they were all different angles, it would make this a lot easier on me. And that way I could visibly clear a firearm every time I picked it up, as is my general habit. And videos are a little bit different. So I'm making this disclaimer just to tell you that, whatever you see me handling here on these videos has been cleared by me. Sometimes they're brand new out of the box. If you see a rifle come out of the box and it's still got the chamber indicator in it, well, that's indicating to me that, the gun is unloaded in the first place, because most firearms now, when they come out of the box, they're going to have some kind of a chamber indicator, or in the case of, say, a revolver, it's going to have a yellow or orange spacer in front of the cylinder to indicate that the firearm is not loaded. So in any event, please just bear with me and know that for the expediency of the video, I'm not visibly clearing the firearm every time I pick it up. As an instructor, I understand that safety is 100% important. As a matter of fact, some of the videos we even talk about different safety issues or problems that have come about. So it's not something that's new to me. It's not something I do on purpose. It's just for the sake of the videos. I cannot visibly clear everything in a way that would make everybody happy. Not that I can make everybody happy when I'm doing these videos anyway. So I just got to do what I can do. So anyway, I just want to let you know that everything is clear and safe, and there's no need for you to be concerned. I know in some of these videos, like when I do a handgun video, there's a lot of times I'll turn this thing around and point it and let you see from the camera's perspective the rear sights. Well, that means obviously the thing's pointing back at me, and I'm not making a big effort to move out of the way, because I'm trying to do this video and that's the way that I can see it. So if that disturbs you, then I apologize in advance, but that's just it. That's the way I can, that's the way these are, and that's the way I can do it. So I'm doing the best I can with what I got. In any event, these firearms that you see me handling here are safe. They have been cleared by me, and there is no need to be that concerned. So anyway, just wanted to get that out of there. This applies to all my videos, and unfortunately, just to prevent any further commentary on the matter, you'll probably see this disclaimer at the beginning of every video I do. So this is 3 minutes of your life you ain't gonna get back. Thanks a lot. I appreciate you watching, and continue on to the main course. Hey, Matt, Red Ritter Fits here. All right, if you're here, you may have seen the first 2 parts of this video's series. We were talking about the Ruger 41 Magnum Blackhawk Bisley Flattop, and what of the things that came out of that was, it said it's a flat top. What is a flat top? And then you look at the revolver, as you do here. Whoops, wrong way. And it says on there, Ruger 41 Magnum caliber, new model Blackhawk. Well, new model, that infers that there was an old model, and as there indeed was an old model. What is an old model? What is a new model? What's the difference? What's a flat top? Why is it a big deal? So I'm going to do my best to explain that to you as much as I can. All right, to understand this, you have to go back to the days of yore, back in the 50s. Actually, let's go back farther than that. Let's go back to like 1946 or 1947. Yeah, I can do that. I don't have my notes here. So, gonna have to wing it. All right. Anyway, we'll go back to, like I said, we're gonna go right back to right after World War II. All right. Colt makes the single action army. That's like one of the most widely used single action revolvers in history. Okay. It's also, everybody knows a Colt when they see it. It's just there. Colt, during World War II, like everybody else, went into wartime manufacturing. I mean, they were producing all kinds of stuff, weapons, other things besides weapons. And so they, like everybody else, had to take their plants and retool them for whatever it is they were making, okay? Whether it be guns or, tanks or whatever. So Colt had a bunch of their tooling and their machinery. Part of their plant was set up to produce the single action army. When they decided to go into wartime manufacturing, they had to do something with that. And my understanding, and this may not be 100% true, but my understanding from what I have read over the years is a lot of this production tool work and production machinery and stuff like that, when they had to get it out of the plants to replace it with new stuff to make whatever they're going to make for the war, a bunch of it ended up in their parking lot. Some of it ended up in some basement somewhere, warehouses somewhere else, and some of it ended up in their parking lot. So you can imagine it sat there for several years, okay? So at the end of the war, 1946, 1947, they start tooling back. They're going back in there to figure out what they're going to make and what they're going to do, and they dropped all the wartime stuff. And they came across a lot of their production tool work, production machinery and stuff for the single action army, and they said, you know what, this stuff is about ruined. It's rusty, it hasn't been maintained, some of it's been sitting out in the parking lot, and I don't think there's going to be that much call for a single action revolver anymore, because that's old, archaic stuff. Everybody's going to want the new, the 1911s, the double action stuff. I mean, there's a lot of new stuff's going to happen. I think we'll just quit making the single action army. So they pulled it in 1946 or 1947. They pulled it from their lineup. Well, one of the people that was watching that situation fairly carefully was a guy named Bill Ruger, who has a new company that he had started up making 22s. And he thought to himself, the single action is not dead. I think it will do well. So he created the single 6, which was a 22 caliber single action revolver based on the Colt. So he went through the Colt, and he was a few things that he changed about the Colt. The springs, for instance, he went to coil springs instead of the leaf springs. Several other things that he thought would make it a much better revolver as far as making it last longer. One of the things he did not change pretty much was the firing mechanism, okay? And this was something that people knew about the Colts from way back. When you pull the hammer back on a Colt, it spells Colt, C-O-L-T, click, 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 click. That's what they said. And you had a safety notch, you had a half cock notch, and you had one more click, and then you had full cock, which is what you wanted when you pulled the trigger. The bad thing about that was the safety notch and the half cock notch were not really that safe. It was just parts of the hammer. There were little notches in the hammer that were being held up by the sear, and those things could break. And so people over a period of time learned, and they were cautioned by Colt at some point. I wish you could see this entire poster behind me, because the first thing it says on this poster, this is a poster about the Colt Single Action Army. The first thing it says is, always rest the hammer over an empty chamber. That's what people knew about the Colt. You had room for 6, but you only loaded 5. Load 1, skip 1, load 4. And that put your hammer down on an empty chamber. So that was a common thing. And it was something that most people adhered to. Because what happens is, even with your safety notch or your half-cock notch or even not, when your hammer is sitting directly on the firing pin and the firing pin is sitting directly on a live round, bad things can happen if you dropped it, if you hit it with a hammer, if you bumped it on a fence post. When you see on Gunsmoke where the guy walks up to the sheriff's office and he pulls his revolver out and he starts hammering this thing down. Well, hopefully that didn't happen too much. That's a good example of something that bad things can happen when you're doing that. So it was an accepted fact, even by the old-time gunslingers, that you only carried 5 beans in the wheel, so to speak. So Bill Ruger did not change that. And on his first 22, the single 6, it clicked 4 times. You had to put it to the half-cock notch in order to rotate the cylinder to load it and to unload it. And he recommended that you only put, load 1, skip 1, load 4. Do not rest a hammer on an empty chamber. So anyway, Bill Ruger had said, I bet you the single-action revolver is not dead. And he was absolutely correct, because what happened after that was the introduction of television. And with television came the Western. And with Westerns came a lot of kids' Westerns and a lot of shows. And boy, cowboys were using the single-action revolver more than ever. And that was just jumping up the demand for the single-action army, which unfortunately was not being produced. But fortunately for Bill Ruger, he was producing his 22. With the advent of the 357 Magnum, he decided he wanted to do something a little better. He wanted to come up. He wanted to branch out into center fire instead of rimfire. So he came up with these Blackhawk, which was a bigger version of the single 6, still based on the Colt. There were, like I said, a few differences. His springs were better. The internals were somewhat better. But he maintained everything the same way that he did with the 22. Now, the Blackhawk became a big success as well. So this is, and in the meantime of this, just to throw this out there, Colt reintroduced the single-action army at some point, and then later down the road pulled it, and then later down the road reintroduced it, and later down the road pulled it again. Their marketing people obviously were not real big on keeping things. So anyway, so Ruger came out with a Blackhawk. That's where the Blackhawk came from. It was just a bigger centerfire version of the single 6, which was a 22 rimfire revolver. What I'm going to show you now, this is out of my personal collection. This is an example of a Blackhawk, one of the original Blackhawks, produced in the 50s. These were produced like this all the way up until about 1962. And we'll cover that in a minute. So, this is a Blackhawk. And if you, let me put this up if you can read that. I don't know if you can read that or not. But it says, Ruger Blackhawk, 44 Magnum caliber. So this was the 44 version. So this was produced after 56, when the 44 Magnum came out. But this is still one of the original Blackhawks. Notice it doesn't say new model or anything like that. So how these operated, like I said, is, if you remember about when we talked about single action revolvers, you have a loading gate. You flip open that loading gate, but my cylinder is not moving. So how can I load it or unload it or check to see if it's loaded or not if my cylinder is not moving? Well, you have to pull the hammer back to the half cock notch. That releases the pawl here. Now I can rotate my cylinders. And as you can see in the reflection there, they're all empty. But this is how you loaded and unloaded the revolver on the half cock notch. Put this down here. And then once you went back to that, you were locked again. So, but you notice that distinctive sound when you pull the hammer back. Nothing sounds like that. So this was the original, one of the original Blackhawks. Now, where does the term flat top come from? Well, when Bill Ruger made his original Blackhawks, he made them like this. And you'll notice this. This is called a flat top. The top strap of this revolver is very wide and very broad and very flat. And as a matter of fact, he's got adjustable sights here. They are inset into this. So it maintains a nice flat profile. This was generally the way it was. This was the way all of them were. So they were informally called flat tops. Okay, that's where flat top came from. Now, sometime about 1962, there were some changes made. This revolver was changed somewhat. And let's pick this up and I'll show you. This is not quite period correct, but this will kind of let you know what I'm looking at. If you'll notice, this part of this frame here is no longer flat. You still have the sights, but now they have these ears that come up and protect the rear sight. What Bill Ruger was trying to do at the time was make this a little bit stronger frame. And he beefed up the frame somewhat to make it a little bit stronger. And one of the things he did was he left this here. Instead of this being grinded flat and the sights being inset, they were mounted on top, and these ears were left here to protect the rear sight. But it did make the frame bigger. So the flat top was no more. Now you had these same revolvers, but was no longer a flat top. You had these ears here. So the flat tops were disappearing. Now, about 10 years after that, 1972, Ruger came up with a new design. Actually, I don't know how much of it he came up with and how much of it he actually took from somebody else, honestly, because there were a couple of other companies doing this kind of thing at the time. I think Harrison and Richardson was one of them. But Ruger stopped making the old model revolver. He took this same revolver that he said, do not load more than 5. Do not load a live round under the hammer. And he decided to make it safer. Now, I'm sure there were lawsuits going on because there were lawsuits being thrown about in the gun industry at that point. And I don't know how many he had facing, but I know he was facing some. He decided to make it safer. He brought out a thing called the transfer bar, which is a device that sits in between the firing pin and the hammer. And the shape of the hammer was changed so that when the hammer fired, it hit the transfer bar, and the transfer bar is what pushed the firing pin and what made the round go. At rest, the transfer bar sits down here. The hammer could not reach the firing pin. So he incorporated that into all his revolvers from like 1972 on. They became known as the new model Blackhawks. So that's where the new model comes from. So you had the old model, which happened to be a flat top, with the 4 clicks and the half cock notch that you had to use in order to move the cylinder around and load and unload the revolver, to the new model. Like this. This is the new model. This is the one we were looking at. The cylinder still won't move, but you don't have a half cock notch. This hammer goes all the way back, and that's it. The cylinder will not move until you open the loading gate, which is stiff right this minute, which you can't do well, that's the other thing, which you can't do while the revolver is cocked. That's another part of the safety mechanism. So you have to unload. Once you undo the loading gate, the cylinder turns. So there was a couple of different parts added. Let me see if you can, hopefully, maybe you can see that. If you see that in there, you can just see the firing pin and you can see the transfer bar. If I hold the hammer up and pull the trigger, you'll see the transfer bar moving to cover up the firing pin. Now you see this hammer is shaped differently. And when you pull the hammer, the transfer bar goes up. This catches on the transfer bar, pushes the firing pin, and shoots, and enables you to shoot. When I am not shooting, the trigger is forward, the transfer bar is down, the hammer does not rest on the firing pin. That's the way it works. But anyway, that's all part of what Bill Ruger designed. He called it the new model. So that's why now, from that point on, about 72, all your Blackhawks and your single sixes and your Bearcats, sort of, but those were the two main models with your single sixes and your Blackhawks. They will say new model because they are designed with, there was a new trigger mechanism, there was a new hammer mechanism, there was a transfer bar mechanism, and they were designed to be totally separate from the old models. Now, if you remember also, we had this was in the box, and it says, do you own a Ruger Blackhawk single six or Bearcat revolver like this? When it says 3 screws on the side, the hammer is a little bit different, whatever. They came up with a program where you could actually send them, like this old model. I could send it to them. And what they'll do is they'll change out all the internals so that I now have a transfer bar and I don't have a half cock notch. And it's a safer, I can carry 6 rounds instead of 5. It's a safer revolver. And I can send that to them. They will do it. It's absolutely free of charge. And then they will send it back to me. So that is out there. In case you ever want to do it, they still do it today. They started this in 1972 and they're still doing it. All right. So that is the difference between an old model and a new model. That is the difference between a flat top and a not a flat top. Now, when the old model disappeared, you know, the flat tops went out of existence in about 1962. In 1972, the old models went to the new models. The new models didn't have the flat top either. You know, wrong pistol, sorry, hold on. Didn't have the flat tops either. They had, you know, they kept this design, stronger frame. So at some point in the last, I don't know how many years, at some point, there were some special editions made, like Lipsy's, for instance. They're a distributor, but they have some sway with Ruger because they sell a lot of them, I guess. And Davidson's does the same thing, and Sport South does the same thing. They went to Ruger and said, would you create a special edition for us? And Ruger did it to themselves. They came out with some anniversary editions, and they said, you know, it'd be nice if we redesigned our revolvers to have all the new safety features, but we still had the flat top, because the flat tops were in demand. The frames were a little bit different, and that's a lot more to get into in this video that I'm not going to get into. But the flat tops were very much desired. Not just because they were the old models, but just because of the frame sizes, and people liked them anyway. And so what they did on these anniversary models and these special editions they wanted to come out with is they decided, well, it'll be a new model revolver, but we'll use the old flat top frame. And so that's what they did on this one, flat top. And this is another example of a flat top, which is an earlier special edition flat top. So they're out there. So they started coming out with more and more flat tops, and the frame's a little bit different. In this case, the original frame size of the Ruger Blackhawk was based on the Colt. As things got bigger and better with 44 Magnum particularly, Bill Ruger recognized that he needed to beef up the frame a little bit to make it more sturdy, and he did that. The old frame and the old grip frames, people really liked them for one reason or another, and they wanted a return to that, but they weren't going to get it. And so they kind of held on to what they had. And every so often again, Ruger comes out with some kind of limited edition or anniversary edition, and they will revert to that particular frame size. Now, at some point in time, and I can't remember exactly when this came out either, I think it was his mid-80s, give or take a little bit, Ruger came out with one called a revolver called a Vaquero, and it was based on the old Colt. As far as the sights were different, it was brought out really for the cowboy action shooters, which was becoming a big deal, the SAS shooters, And this is an example of that. And you notice this is a new model, so all I had to do was open the loading gate and my cylinder returned. And you notice there's no half cock notch, all right? But this looks funny, it looks different. Yes, this is based more on a Colt. The original Colts had this kind of a rounded frame. That's why Bill Ruger went with the flat tops to start with, is because this is a much better, the flat tops, the frame that he had was much stronger and broader and wider than that. I mean, look at the difference. So there's much more to them. And he built his pistols, revolvers, to be stronger. But anyway, the Vaqueros came out, and they were still a little bit bigger than the original Colt, but they were based on the original Colt simply for looks. The sights were not as good, but they came out, and the cowboy action shooters, etc., they really liked these, as well as a lot of other people do, and they really went for these. The original Vaquero just says Ruger Vaquero. This one happens to be in 45 Colt. That was run for a period of years and stopped. And then they redesigned it with a smaller frame, more in line with the Colt. And that came out as the new Vaquero, and I don't have one to show you. But the new Vaquero, if you see a Ruger marked new Vaquero, that is the smaller frame Vaquero. The only thing about it is you have to watch it, because the frames will not hold up to quite as much pressure as the old frames. And most people are using them for cowboy action shooting, which is not something they want to juice up their loads with anyway. But it's just something to know in case you run into one. The frames are going to be a little bit smaller than the original Vaqueros, more in line with the original Blackhawk frames before they were beefed up with the advent when Bill Ruger started creating chamber in his Blackhawk in 44 Magnum. He realized that he needed to make them a little bit stronger, so the frame size changed over a period of time, along with the grip frame. That's a whole other story. So anyway, now you know the original Colt, the old model Ruger, the new model Ruger. The old model had the flat top. The old model could have the ears. The new model came with the ears. This is a new model. Until the anniversary editions came out as the flat top and the old frame style. So there's a lot more to it. It's hard to get all this in a short video, and I know I've gone way too long already. But I hope that it's been helpful to kind of clarify the difference between what's an old model, what's a new model, what's a flat top, what's not, what's the difference. So I hope it was helpful. Thanks for watching. I appreciate your time. Stay tuned. We have one more part, at least, to this. The next part is, what is a Bisley? So you notice, you know, the revolver that we talked about has the Bisley grip frame, as opposed to the non-Bisley grip frame. See the difference? So we're going to talk about what's a Bisley. So stay tuned. That's next. Again, I appreciate you watching. And until I see you again, y'all stay safe.